Thank you. So we'll get started. First, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. And I was asked to provide the welcome statement and describe kind of why we're here. And we're here to have a discussion and raise awareness of the challenges to create and maintain affordable housing in the region. That's really the bottom line. First, Exeter does boast a robust and diverse housing stock, and we have our fair share of housing in the region. There's no question about that compared to our neighbors. We have mobile homes, older single families, newer single families, dense neighborhoods, multifamily, duplexes. We have a wide range of housing from affordable to $1 million homes. So we have a great diverse stock, but we recognize that maintaining that diversity is key to what makes Exeter a great place to be, and gives opportunity for the workforce that's needed by our local businesses to have somewhere to live, somewhere close by and in Exeter. So about a year and a half ago, the Housing Advisory Committee, was that about right? Housing Advisory Committee was created by the Board of Selectmen, and we met diligently over the last 18 months, and we really examined the housing market. What are the needs? And we're tasked with coming up with a set of recommendations on how to proceed. And one of the common threads in the recommendations, on several recommendations, mentioned the need to create, maintain affordable housing. And just want to clarify what affordable housing is. Affordable housing is not necessarily subsidized housing. When we're talking a single family home in Exeter, George might correct me on this, but 307,000 or less. Yeah, 307,000 is the high end. So anything less than $307,000 for a single family home in Exeter is considered affordable. I'm not going to get into the math of what affordable is, but I mean, maybe I'll leave that to others to do. But that's still, a significant investment. So what are the site we were looking at? So we decided the Seacoast Workforce Housing Coalition, Robin Comstock, came to me and asked, because they do a charrette, an affordable housing charrette every year, one in New Hampshire and one in Maine, correct? Yeah. So she came to me and said, would Exeter like to host the charrette? So we took it to the Housing Advisory Committee. We discussed it. We felt it was aligned with our recommendations. The Housing Advisory Committee felt the need for, to create, maintain, analyze affordable housing, so we make sure we have a place for our workforce of the region to live. So we thought it was a great fit. We invited them here to hold the charrette. And they chose a specific site, which you'll hear more about, but it's a site just downtown here. It's a half-acre site, and I'll let others describe it. But what I want to make sure is this is not a development proposal for that site. This is using a specific site as a real life example, because people like, it's a tangible example. What could be done if you were to take this site and create affordable housing? What would it take? Just to basically make you aware of the issues and the challenges with creating affordable housing. But I just want to say it's not a development proposal for this. It may come out that you need to, maybe decrease setbacks or change some zoning that exists to create this affordable housing. That's not being done. If it is being done, it's done at a later date, and it's a whole other discussion to make those changes happen. So tonight it's just exploring the idea, talking about it, and they're going to examine the site and then come back on Friday and do a reveal on what they found. So with that, welcome Robin Comstock, and I'd like to thank all the volunteers Robin got. I'm sure we'll mention who they are, they've been great. We got a good team together, and I'll pass it off to Robin to kick it off and talk about the Seacoast Workforce Housing Coalition. Thank you. Oh, Jen, wait, sorry.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Dave, so much. It's great to be here tonight in Exeter. My name is Robin Comstock. I'm the Executive Director of the Seacoast Workforce Housing Coalition. Our goal, and the reason why we're here, is to do what is often referred to as a charrette, which means a community planning session, a community conversation about planning for the future for your town and your home. I would like to thank our sponsors for this event. Many of you may know we do not charge a community to hold this dialogue and to have this conversation in the community. Instead, our sponsors underwrite our costs. Our sponsors are Optima Bank and Trust, Exeter Hospital, and Riverwoods. Our sponsors are charitable and kind sponsors, and I am deeply grateful to, are the Exeter Inn, Me and Ollie's, the Green Bean, and Las Olas. So thank you all. All of the people who will be working on hearing you and developing concepts that we can present to you are all volunteers, and we'll provide you that list too quite soon. I want you to know that we were established approximately 17 years ago to explore and discover all aspects of middle market housing in terms of how the accessibility and inventory of middle market housing impacts both the social and the economic structure of community. Our website is www.seacoastwhc.org, and I encourage you to look us up and explore the information that we provide you on that website. The quick outline of what will happen through this charrette process is we will have a community dialogue tonight between 6 and 8 o'clock p.m. Our volunteer architects, engineers, designers, and landscape experts, as well as our financial feasibility team, will take all of the information they hear from the community tonight and organize that tomorrow throughout the course of the day, and come back on Friday at 8 o'clock in the morning to begin to develop solid concepts that are tested by the financial feasibility team. As volunteers, they will work all day on Friday from 8 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock at night, and we will then open up the Exeter Town Hall again at 6 o'clock at night until 8 for them to present their conclusions and recommendations to you. They'll talk at that time about ways to be able to provide and broaden your inventory of middle market housing to provide quality, livable housing for the workforce of Exeter and the surrounding area as well. With that, to begin the conversation, it gives me it's a great privilege to be able to introduce to you George Regan, who is the Housing Awareness Director at the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. He'll talk to us a little bit about what affordable means, what middle market means, and the impact of being able to have employees of the employers that you want to attract to provide the services and products that you want, from hospitals to retail and dining, art and culture, and more, within the context of your community. And with that, George, I'd like to turn it over to you. Ladies and gentlemen, George Regan.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Robin. So I'm the Housing Awareness Program Administrator or Director or whatever Robin wants to call me at any given moment, which is great. And I work with New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. For those that don't know, we're a public benefit corporation, self-funded. We're not an agency of the state. We are an instrumentality of the state, so we handle housing needs, federal housing programs that the state receives, because there is no separate housing agency in the state. And one of the things that New Hampshire Housing does, aside from its homeownership programs and tax credit programs and the like, is that one of our goals is to provide leadership in research, public education, and advocacy around the need for a balanced and adequate supply of housing, and how that relates to the economic development of the state and of a region. And I think that's really important. And I chose not to do any PowerPoints. There's a ton. We collect, analyze a ton of data. We put out publications annually, one of them the annual rent survey. If you ever want to go online, nhhfa.org, there's some great information there to look at housing, not just here, but around the region and around the state. So I wanted to I've been sort of asked to talk about this workforce housing and what affordability means. And one of the things that I wanted to get back to, and maybe why we call it workforce housing, I think oftentimes when we mention affordable housing, we all kind of get a little concerned about what that might mean. And of course, from an affordable, all of us in the room, things are affordable at a different level We have different incomes. We may be married, single. We pool those incomes, and that gives us a range of affordability. For some, we can afford higher-end housing. For some, based on our income, and that may be based on where we are in our careers, our career choices, and all sorts of things, may mean something different and may mean different likes and wants. It's important when we talk about this to understand demographics, understand housing needs and preferences. Demographics, we know we're an aging state, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our housing policy might be just to look at age-restricted housing. We look at and know that people want to age in their homes if they can, or age in their community if they can. And what does that mean when we think of housing? And it's not just affordability, but it's housing choice. And it's not just workforce housing or affordable housing, it's housing for people. People, families, our friends, our neighbors. You know, we may not know them all, but we know a lot of people that are looking for housing and have wants and desires. It's important to know that when we think about, if we're concerned about our workforce, and especially people entering the workforce, to know that people nowadays that graduate from college, as we all know, I think, have a lot of college debt that maybe some of us didn't have. And so when we think of affordability, it may be different than what we know. And I think part of the benefit of a Charrette process and listening to a lot of people is we kind of learn, and maybe we can expand our understanding. And hopefully what I'd like to do is sort of expand our understanding of the connection of housing and economic development. One of the things I wanted to say, folks may be familiar or not with Russ Tebow, who runs Applied Economic Research. He's a consultant that a lot of communities and folks go to. I know we've used him a lot. One of the things I remember him saying as I was prepping him, or we were prepping for a panel presentation, was he said, you know, the labor force availability is the constraint on economic growth. Labor force availability, that's the constraint on economic growth. Housing is the constraint on labor force growth. Housing, we have to look at where do people live and their proximity to employers. We've done employer surveys. A lot of employers will tell us that that housing cost drives a lot of wage pressure for them, and also their ability to recruit and retain employees. I think we have to realize that, you know, we're competing now at a 2.7% unemployment rate with people that aren't just from here. They're taking a look at job options all across the country. And they're looking at a lot of things, and we have a different structure in our state, so some people may be shocked by our housing prices. You know, that's just part of the conversation and the recruitment. So it's important to go back to, well, when we talk about workforce, that's the reason. We're looking at not just what's affordable by some calculation. David mentioned 3075. The state has a workforce housing law that I'd like to say helps provide guidance when we're trying to scratch our heads and say, what is workforce housing, or what's affordable for a workforce? And it's basically looking at incomes based on wages that are paid. And so one of the things I took just a quick look at community profiles. You know, largest businesses in Exeter. You got Exeter Hospital with 900 employees, Phillips Exeter 520, Riverwoods with 500, Osram Sylvania. And so I look at that and say, well, what's the range of employees? There's probably a high-end employees there, people starting out, maybe young engineers in their careers. I don't know. But there's a wage factor that's going there. What's not listed there would probably be entrepreneurs, lots of small businesses that are backbone of our region and of our state. And what are they paying? Who are they trying to attract? What's the challenge to get folks to come here and work here, maybe stay here? And then I looked at, you know, Portsmouth, Liberty Mutual Insurance, over 1,000 people. Thermo Fisher Analytics, about 274. Bottom Line Technologies, 365. City of Portsmouth, municipalities, hospitals, range of incomes. So when we're talking here about, you know, affordable, and we want to not talk about low income or tax credit projects, that's fine, but we're talking about wages that are paid. What I can tell you then is we look at that data, wages, and then we look at households, how people are living. That's a little bit different. Someone may be, you know, maybe living singly. I'm a single homeowner. There are people that maybe are unmarried, so they be maybe non-family households, what we'd call them. When I looked at Exeter data for non-family households, so again, unrelated people, that could be a couple of folks that are not yet married, maybe a couple of unrelated guys that graduated from college, they're a couple of years into it, and they're living together because they're trying to afford things, and they combine their household income. So for non-family household income in Exeter, that's $47,122. That's the median, that's the middle. And so that helps us as we think about affordability. And we look at, okay, in housing industry and in banking, a lot of times we looked at, well, housing ratio shouldn't be more than 30% of your income. If I was to apply that, that would mean a gross monthly rent of $1,178. So that's rent and utilities. So, so what does that mean in terms of affordability? Well, it means when we do this exercise of rental, or we do this exercise on the single-family purchase price side, we have to look and say, and to Dave's point, how do we maintain? We may have a good inventory now, but our economy is growing. Again, low unemployment. Where do we get the workforce? We're taking them from maybe other businesses, but we have to try to find a place for them to be close by so they can live here and work. And so that helps us understand, we're talking about employers in the region, we're talking about pooled sort of income, and that helps us understand what things should be on a rental side and maybe on a home ownership side. So I don't want to get too far into the data there. I know we do an annual rental survey. I know the Exeter Housing Commission thought our survey was a little high. I will say that our survey doesn't include subsidized properties. And as Dave said, there's a range of rental and single-family homes in Exeter. It's very diverse. And with that is a lot of subsidized properties as well. But we don't include that in our survey. In Exeter, so we don't have a ton of data, but in Exeter we had to go back to 2016 for a two-bedroom median rent. And it was about $2,419. All bedrooms was about $1,243. So I go back to that number of affordability of 1,178 for the non-family. And so you look at it and say, what does that mean? Well, to Dave's point, it's just when we're trying to build things, do we know that what's being built is going to be maybe affordable? On the new home side of things, if you look at homes that are being built that are new as opposed to existing, we tend to find that those are a whole lot higher. So as you try to grow, and in your exercise, as you try to do, I think, single family, how do you try to do that in a way that's affordable, knowing that given labor, housing costs, that may drive price up? And so one of the things, I know we've talked about this with the financial folks, and as we go through this Charrette thing, is when we talk about this, there's economics of construction. There's the economics of it, of development, and realizing that when we do this, we have to look at what we have in terms of a town that we can use, and that is usually land use regulations, approval processes, and the time it takes to do that. And that's really going to spell how we try to create some level of something that may be affordable, but it has to be something the developer is going to want to do. So we have to look at these economics of development. And quite frankly, in the end, we look at it and say it's probably going to be of some kind of development, some percentage that may be targeted, while the rest have to be market rate. That's just what we see when it comes to the economics of it. So I wanted to put that out there and leave you with that. So as you look to do this, we're thinking about what are the wages in the region. Are we concerned about making sure that we've got an employment base can help fuel the increased economic development in this community and in our region? And so those are the things to think about. And I think that a Charrette is a great effort, and as Dave and others have said, where you may be looking at a real piece of property, but it really helps to have a conversation about who's this for? Who's it going to want? What's it mean for our community? What's it mean for the well-being of our community and for the region economically and socially and community-wise? And I think that's the foundation of a really good discussion, because it comes back down to people. And I think with this, we have a video that I'm going to show, correct? So again, in New Hampshire Housing, we're always trying to help folks have this conversation. So we did 3 videos back in 2011. One of them was of Exeter, and it was about compact development. So there's 2 folks in the video, Ben Frost, who's from New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, and Roger Hawk, who sadly has passed away with Hawk Planning Resources, a really smart, passionate man who really devoted his life to community planning and development. And so this is about an 11-minute video shot here and around. You'll see familiar places. Sylvia Von Ahleck was the planner at the time, and it just sort of helps to talk about development, thoughtful planning, and some of the issues we deal with as we think about that. So I'm going to try to tee this up quickly.
We're here today in Memphis. downtown Exeter, and this is a wonderful example of a traditional compact development community in the state of New Hampshire. And one of the things that I find fascinating about this downtown is that it was built on the premise of horse and carriage. It was before cars existed, and what we've learned in the last 100 years or so of the Industrial Revolution and automobiles and everything else is that there's a lot of value to having that compactness. We have the ability to move all over the place with cars, but we've learned that living in places that have a real sense of character and walkability and the ability to go from your home or your apartment down to get a cup of coffee or to work or whatever is a really valuable character trait that we've lost in the suburbanization of America.
Ben Frost and Roger Hawk, two of New Hampshire's leading experts in town planning, got together recently to talk about why Exeter is a good example of a New Hampshire town that both preserved its historic downtown and encouraged new development that complements and strengthens the community.
I think one of the most important things to recognize is that we have people living in the downtown area, and that gives a constant level of activity. Even at nighttime when the shops are closed, there are people still there. There's a real sense of life in the community. It's very important. And as you look behind us, you'll see a lot of vehicles moving around and also a lot of pedestrian activity. Because people live here, they walk around from place to place because they have the opportunity to.
Exeter is the quintessential New England town, founded in the early 1600s.
Sylvia Von Aulick is Exeter's town planner, responsible for blending Exeter's living past with its potentially vibrant future.
One of the big things you can see is the different roof line. How fun is that? So the buildings, you can see the history in itself. 1860, 1770.
Bringing buildings back to their original characters, part of what makes New England villages so unique because they're the genuine article.
Yet at the same time, we don't want to stifle innovation and growth, so we have to allow for some level of innovation, whether it's new construction or rehabilitation of existing structures, to accommodate changing economic needs, because business owners will go to places where it's easier for them to build and conduct their business. And if a municipality has regulations that make it really tough, they're going to look elsewhere. Exeter's done a really good job at encouraging continued economic growth and activity.
Exeter's willingness to be innovative is apparent in the Swampscott block, a new building on Water Street in the heart of downtown.
Downtown, specifically the downtown area, has been very stable. It does not change. So the concern of how this would fit in, what sort of people would be living here, what sort of businesses would come, those are huge concerns.
While many towns shy away from proposals for workforce housing, Exeter's town boards have long supported a diversity of housing options.
Exeter Planning Board, a 12-member board, they realized that the subdivisions that they were approving, they could not afford to live in those subdivisions. That was very important. It's not that they were feeling they were living in poverty, but how can they consider any of their own children staying here in Exeter when those homes were going from $450,000 a house to upwards of $650,000 and more.
An opportunity to put ideas into action came along when the owner of a parking lot on Main Street came in to talk to Sylvia about what the town would like to see there.
So we walked over here and we said, this is what we think can happen. A parking garage of 2 levels with no internal ramps, taking advantage of the elevation differences. And then we want definitely businesses on the first floor, on the street level, and then residential up above. And that was how it started. From there, those representatives found a developer that was interested in doing an affordable housing component. So it's been so perfect. But it was a long process. This had to go in front of the zoning board of adjustment, it had to go in front of planning board. But the developer persevered. The activity on that side of the street was very limited, obviously, because it was sort of a hole in the fabric of the streetscape.
The Squamscott block is a planner's dream because it's urban infill or downtown infill, it's mixed use, it's mixed income, it's architecturally consistent with the beautiful buildings you have here in Exeter.
So it reinforces the character of the Main Street.
Yeah.
Myth busting, that there would be just so much traffic and parking generated from this development that people would not be able to even move up and down the street. Not happening, not at all. Myth number two, that it would bring an unsavory element because of the affordable housing component, and some unsavory characters would come into the town and you'd have higher crime. I'm not hearing any sirens, that didn't happen.
The whole idea of creating workforce housing, which allows the community to have a variety of housing options, not just low-income apartments or $2 million homes, but a lot of stuff in between that can be comfortable and affordable places for school teachers and firefighters and municipal employees and people that staff businesses in the community.
Right, and this really is the backbone of our workforce.
Yeah.
In many communities, people worry about the impact that new development will have on schools.
There's a real negative bias against families with kids because, as you all know, given the tax structure in the state, kids equal cost to schools equals more money into the town budget. And what we have found and actually known for a long time is that single-family houses generate the highest number of children per house, and 1- and 2-bedroom apartments or condominiums generally produce fewer children per household.
People also worry about the impact that new development will have on municipal costs.
If you're having to grade and plow and pave hundreds of miles of road that are only serving a small percentage of the population, that costs the municipal budget quite a bit of money. But if you can have all of those, or the vast majority of those businesses, residents located in close proximity to the village center, you're saving a lot of money in highway department road budgets, school busing costs, it just goes on and on.
Just one block back from the bustling Main Street, downtown Exeter presents a different side of itself.
I think one of the wonderful things about downtown Exeter is the fact that it's on a river that connects to the Great Bay, and they've been able to take advantage of the waterfront.
It's just a minute's walk from the bustle of downtown. You've got a very quiet place, a space where people can come and just have some quiet time and watch the water. Or right across the river, you've got old mill buildings that have been converted to residential uses. It's a wonderful addition to the downtown of Exeter. Every town, every community has some sort of asset like this that they can tap into. And it might require some careful, thoughtful planning. It may take years of redevelopment and conscious planning, but it is well worth the effort.
One of the other advantages of trying to encourage compact growth in and around town centers is that you can then take the pressure off the less developed areas of the community, and that enables you, the community, to preserve those rural spaces, that rural landscape that people, I think, all over New Hampshire so highly value.
So while growth, like it or not, comes to New Hampshire, the kinds of places that we choose to build are up to us.
So growth might be inevitable, but ugliness and bad design is not.
Right.
And it's up to good planning and a thoughtful effort to come up with something that looks really good and provides a place where people want to live.
Thank you so much, George. I love that video. It's highly informative, and I just think it's terrific. So thank you so much. I want to thank, before I invite the next speaker, the Exeter Area Chamber of Commerce, who was a partner for this event. And I want to announce the design team real quick on all the volunteers who are making this possible. So Andre Papillon, Michael Castagna, Rochelle Eli, and Uta Luxem, thank you so much. Carla Goodnight, Darren Winham, Dave Sharples, Jennifer Ramsey, John Shagnon, Mart Batchelder, Robbie Woodburn, Shannon Alter, Vicki Martell. This program would not be possible without you. And with that, I'd like to let you, as an audience, know that our group is divided into teams. A design team and a financial feasibility team are the key components of this. The lead of our financial feasibility team is Michael Castagna, and he has a few words he would like to offer for all of our consideration as we move forward into developing concepts for you as a community. Michael, you want to pop up here?
Good evening. Real quick, our task really is to make the design that we're going to come up with, or the concepts that we come up with, make them tangible, make them real, make them put them in perspective as far as a realistic development cost. And so somebody can come in and actually take the next step or the next series of steps and actually create what we're trying to accomplish here, and that's to come up with tangible solutions for the different mixes of housing that we're trying to create, and to show the community of Exeter what is possible, and to take that and be able to use that as a tool in trying to further the development of the community, help the workforce, and ultimately, like George said, it's kind of a domino effect. Workforce, housing, economic development, businesses in town being able to increase business, grow their business, new businesses coming in or wanting to come in because there's a viable workforce. So it all works hand in hand. So, and this is one piece of it, and hopefully we'll be able to show you some tangible steps in trying to get there.
One last time, I'd like, well, at least for tonight, I'd like to thank our sponsors again, and we'll get our conversation going. Thank you, Optima, Exeter Hospital, Riverwoods, the Exeter Area Chamber of Commerce, Las Olas, Me and Ollie, and Green Bean. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, I would like to introduce you to your facilitator, Maria Solari. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. Thanks for having us tonight. How many people here are part of the Housing Committee? Just by raise of hands. Okay. And how many people are residents who are not part of the Housing Committee? Awesome. Thank you for coming out. So before we get into some of the meat of the community conversation, first of all, do any of you have any questions about what you heard around what's affordable and mixed-use housing and some of the terms that were used? Do you have any questions about anything? Was there anything you heard tonight that surprised you? No. Okay. Okay. I am going to take a little different tack than what we planned because we're a small group. And I want to talk, and hang on a minute because I need to get over there and get my gear. So take a minute to think about where you live or where you would like to live eventually. Maybe you live somewhere now and you think about you're in a starter home and you have another home in your sights, or maybe, like me, you're getting older and you're starting to think about what's next. And think about what characteristics are important to you where you live. And I'm not talking about granite countertops or a blue bathroom or an avocado-colored stove, but I'm talking about walkability or access or trees, things like that. So take a minute to think about that. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Just pulling up my phone. I'm going to give one of these to you, and you're going to find out where to turn it on. There we go. All right, and I'm going to give one back here, because I am told we have to use these so that it goes on the film. All right, anybody want to share what's important to them? Yeah. It's on. It should be on.
It's on.
Yeah.
Does that work? Oh, okay.
It is.
Okay.
Feel free to sing or recite it as a poem. Either way.
I live on Park Court, which is a small dead-end street. For those of you who know Park Street Common, it's that whole little area of town that has lots of a variety of housing stock. Old New England homes, most of them small. I bought my house as a single parent and new teacher in New Hampshire for $49,900 a few years ago. Most of the houses now in that neighborhood would probably, if they were to come up for sale, including one on our little dead-end street, would probably be in that, $302,000 and lower dollar figure. The thing that's magic about where we live is that it's walkable. Kids grow up together. We've got children that grew up with my daughters who've now moved their families back into these neighborhoods. It's a community that looks after each other, looks out for each other, and that kind of stuff is what we treasure. An environment that respects the places, whether it's trees on the common or kids looking out for each other, or is the bus coming? Did you see? Did somebody miss the bus? It's a real neighborhood. It's not a development. It's something that happened gradually, but it's deeply meaningful for all the people who live there. So when we talk about, for instance, there's a new family that's just moved in on our dead-end street. The most recent family on our dead-end street has been there 26 years. So new is really new. We call them the kids. But they're people that want to be there. They don't, we're going to be there until they take us out in a pine box. So, but it's that kind of community that we really look for when it comes to how does it feel? How does your neighborhood feel? Can you walk someplace? Are people friendly?
Thank you. Who else? Who else wants to share what's important? Yeah. Right behind you.
Hi there. My story is similar to Eileen's. My family and I moved into Exeter in 1979. We moved into a relatively new neighborhood that was built in the late 70s. It goes by the name of Academy Estates. very community, neighborhood-orientated area. Very walkable. It was walkable for the kids to go downtown, to go to schools, both Lincoln Street, the high school and the junior high, which are no longer there, but at that time it was perfect. Most of the neighborhood was all very younger families, raising families. Over time, people like myself aged. Some migrated out, and so over time there's been a turnover in the neighborhood. Excuse me. And in the last several years, young families are now buying and moving back in. So the neighborhood, that feel of that neighborhood that Eileen talks about, is coming back again. It's becoming very vibrant, very community oriented. Neighbors, walking with neighbors, watching each other's children, that type of thing. Very important. Recently, in a story I'll give is a neighbor who was a widow. Her husband passed away several years ago. Got to the point where the house for her was too much. As with a homeowner, you've got upkeep, you've got you got to maintain the yard. She wanted to stay in Exeter, but she did not want to continue living in that house and upkeeping it. There was nothing for her affordable in Exeter that she found that would accommodate her. And I think that happens to a lot of the, we talk about an aging population, and we've got the elderly who want to stay in this town because they're invested in this town. It's got a great sense of community. I mean, people who live here for a long time, and even people who are more recent, will tell you this is the best damn town in all of the United States. And I think a lot of us really believe that. We want to stay, but we need to have some kind of a transition. So we need to do both. We need to want to encourage young families to move in, but a lot of times the young families are moving in and taking over those houses if the older ones, the older people want to migrate out. But they don't want to migrate out of Exeter. So I think we need to find something that works for them also as we look at affordable housing.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, sure.
One of the things that I observed recently when we visited some friends in Worcester, Massachusetts, a friend of my husband's was living in what we thought was age-restricted housing area, really nice condo development, and then we discovered, oh no, it's not. There's families, there's kids, there's dogs, there's people walking around. I think the concept of age-restricted housing, I find is very discriminatory. I think it says something about the community that says we'd like to create this and we'd like to leave somebody out. And if Don's neighbor would like to move to a smaller place, but she doesn't want to be in age-restricted housing. She wants to hear kids playing in the street. She wants to see young people moving around. And I was struck by this development where it was pleasantly normal. Everybody was all different ages and people were walking around. I thought, oh, that's great. Why don't we do that?
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Others? Great.
Is this on?
Yes.
It is. Thank you. My name is Barry Sandberg. I'm a member of the Housing Committee, but also a resident of Exeter for about 11 years now. I'm fortunate to live in the development called Watson Woods, which is one of the sites that were designated as affordable housing, developed 11 years ago by the developer at that time, before I moved in. What's unique about the neighborhood is that, as other people have said, there's a sense of community there. We are a 27 unit, 6-building neighborhood. We abut the Oaklands forest, so people love to be there for all kinds of trailing, bike trails and walking trails. I know as many of the dogs' names in my community as I do the people, because we're all out walking together and we say, how's Lucy, how's Molly, how's this, how's that, what's going on with the neighbors. I've seen some neighbors now for my 11 years, and some are new. There's been turnover there. I'm a member of the homeowners association there as well, so we have a chance to have input into the governance of the association and what our policies and procedures are. That's the positive. I think on the negative side.
Hang on to the
Oh, I'm
negative.
sorry. Just the positives right now?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the
okay.
challenges and the downsides, but.
So I think the sense of community, sense of knowing everybody, the sense of people having a place where they could afford to live and live locally and work locally.
Thank you. What else? Anybody else? Others? Great. Yeah, please.
Okay, I'm going to stand up just for a moment, please.
Terrific.
Hi. My name is Nancy Belanger. I am on the Housing Committee. I was born here 55 years ago. I haven't left because, yes, it is a wonderful town, and I have no desire to leave. Growing up here, we were self-sustaining. We had our grocer downtown. We had our movie theater. I don't want to go back in time. I want to preserve what we have and at the same time create or allow for diversity for people of all economic levels to live in town, to be welcomed, whether you're a renter or a homeowner. One of the things that I found a little odd was that renters were not invested in the community, and I find that to be not so. I chose to be a renter years ago, and one of the things that are concerning me now is the rent levels, in addition to our housing stock levels for what they go for right now. I mean, our houses are going for an average of $350,000 to $400,000 up. Mm-hmm. So that's where my concern is, to try to find a diversity, mixed use maybe. And
so
when
Nancy, I
yes.
just want to keep us focused
yes.
on the question of what's important to you when you think
and
about
that's where
home.
I'm going with
okay.
this, is what's important to me is to see diversity. I've said this, and this is as a resident, a lifelong one, to be able to have the community. And I will say this, community here has increased in the last 5 or 6 years. The people walk down the street again and smile at each other. We lost that for a while, and I'm seeing it come back, which is just wonderful. It's joyful, actually. So that's what I would like to see as a person who's lived here.
Great. Who else?
Hi, my name's Dan. I own a business downtown, and I live in the J.D. Hill neighborhood. I bought a home there in 2012. I had lived in the Exeter Mill for 9 years before that. And what I love about where I live, and I too cannot imagine being anywhere else, but what I love about where I live is that my lot, it's a modest home, it's a cape. It has mature trees on it. That was very important to me. It was important that it be located close to the downtown so that I could bicycle or walk to work quickly, and not have to kind of live my life in a car. So I value it for that. And I too take a lot of joy in the kind of neighborhood feeling that I didn't realize existed there before I moved there. I had a community in the mill that was very close-knit, and I was kind of mourning the loss of that. But then when I moved to my home, I thought I'd be a little less connected to community, and I found that there was a continuum. Barry talking about, knowing the dogs' names, that's a huge part of what knits our neighborhood together, is people out walking their dogs. we say hi to each other. We talk about our dogs. And the other thing I love about where I live is that the Hayes Manufactured Home Park borders my neighborhood, or is part of my neighborhood. And I love that there's a diversity of housing stock in my neighborhood. I don't see that as a negative. I see that as a positive. I grew up in a lower middle class neighborhood, and this kind of feels like a return to that. And I take a lot of comfort in that. So those are the things I love about my neighborhood.
Thanks, Dan.
Hi, so my name's Rachel, and I moved to the Mills in February of this past year. I've been very involved in the community, but I am used to a 45-minute to an hour commute to a bedroom community that I didn't know anybody within, didn't go to church in, went a couple of towns over to do my grocery shopping in. So I love the walkability. I love the variety of stores that we have here. So I can get something at RJ's, but then larger stores or more variety are all over the place. We have On the Vine, we have Hannaford's. But being able to get to the library, see children that are taking advantage of the different programs that are in town and are getting invested and want to stay in a town because they've had such a wonderful childhood, and hearing from folks that grew up in this town and never left. I'd like to be a part of that, and I like to see that it sounds like it's starting over again with this cycle.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. Anybody else? Okay, great, thanks. That's some really great stuff. Okay, are we talking just generally tonight, or are we talking about a specific site?
We are using a specific site as our concept for a possible middle market housing concept. It's at 14 Bow Street,
Okay.
and it is therefore a downtown location.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robin.
Would you like the detail, like the acreage or anything? It's about a half an acre. You're okay?
Yeah, I think, does anybody want specifics about the site? I don't, yeah. So when you think about, right here. Okay, so now we've heard everybody talk about what makes home feel like home to them, what's important. Yeah, Dan. Please.
One of the best things about my neighborhood, and much of Exeter actually, is that the houses are placed on small lots. Yeah, we all forgot to mention that. They're not, especially around the downtown, housing tends to have less land around it, and that leads, I believe that leads to more community and more connections.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Yeah, don't ever hesitate to pull back and say, wait, can we go back to that? So we've heard about what's important, and there's a lot of similarity and general agreement about what makes home feel like home, besides the avocado stove. And so now, thinking about that Bow Street site, what would you want to see there? And in a couple of instances, we started to go down the road of, but what I don't want to see, and I promise you we'll get to that too, but thinking about that Bow Street site, or any site really, for what we call middle, the missing middle, affordable housing, thinking about some of the things you mentioned, like the woman who is having a hard time staying in Exeter. thinking about the things you talked about a range of housing situations and family situations and affordability, what would make you feel good about a development that went there? Yes.
It's two blocks behind the town offices, right over across the street. 2 blocks over on the corner, and it's for sale right now. Yeah.
They were just talking without the microphone. It's behind Blue Moon.
Anybody? Anybody want to pop up? Yeah. Oh.
The question is, what would we like to see on that specific site? What I've enjoyed seeing happen over the last few years in Exeter is that sites closer to the downtown are allowed to be used more densely, more density. I think that's appropriate, and it also spurs the vitality of the downtown by allowing more people to live closer to the downtown. So that's one thing that I would like to see.
I would think that if you could provide mixed age housing possibilities within, you know, I'm trying to envision what this would be. Would it be a couple of houses? Would it be a, you know, sort of condo complex or whatever? But if you had several age possibilities within that same framework, it could be a nice balance. The older woman could babysit kids who are going to.
There you go. Great.
Take care of your own grandkids. It's a challenging site because it's about a half acre. So you've got, yeah, when you start talking about how to be affordable housing, you've got to talk density. And you got to talk density in 2 dimensions. You got to talk about it in terms of the width of the area, in terms of, you know, horizontal as well as vertical height. Then you're going to get to a certain point, a tipping point, where, you know, what is an acceptable height of that. One of the things, and maybe on this site, and I don't know if Exeter has explored this as well, or the builders in Exeter, is something you see out in Greenland a lot on Post Road, condexes, which are duplexes that are joined together by a garage. They can be on smaller lots. It's denser housing. I'm not sure, you know, you could probably fit 1 condex on that lot, so you're only going to get two homes. But so can we look at, you know, you look at density from other aspects and see what the condex, as opposed to just single-family houses, that can create more housing in a denser area or more dense.
Okay. What else? What else would you like to see on that? In any affordable housing project, but specifically to Bow Street too. Trees.
Lots of trees. Definitely trees. Lots of green stuff.
I'm trying my hand tonight a little bit. I'm dipping into graphic.
It's very nice tree.
Facilitation.
Walkability again, but you're in town, so there is walkability.
Right,
but
right.
Decent sidewalks there.
What was that, Eileen?
Decent sidewalks. I'm big into sidewalks.
What else?
Perhaps, again, I'm not sure the exact dimensions of the site, but perhaps a small common area where neighbors can kind of come together, grill, have a little neighborhood party, that kind of thing. An opportunity to build a sense of community.
Great. What else? What else? Yeah, Dan.
We're shooting for affordable housing here, so is it necessary to mention that it's, like reasonably priced, or should we put that on here? I don't mean to be the oracle of the obvious, but.
That's a good point that Dan makes, because we got to talk about affordable, because we've created some density on the street over Franklin Street, and I don't think any of us would consider those as affordable houses. Yeah, we can't forget affordability. That's key to this whole discussion we're having this weekend.
Keep them coming.
Another thing, kind of addressing the point that Nancy Belanger made, we shouldn't just assume that these are going to be built and sold. Could they be, built and leased?
Ah.
To make more rental available.
With the presumption that we're heading towards density in order to make it affordable, how the project might orient to the sidewalk is important to me. Therefore, let's call it the streetscape. And I guess this is an issue of aesthetics. I'd rather have the parking around back and streetscape and porches in front and one driveway, enter the site, park, come forward. That's it.
So that's a really interesting point, and I'm curious if you have a development, a local development that people might know that feels like that to you.
There's a
trying to keep it positive, but if there's one that you say, well, here's one that didn't work like that.
The one that was featured in the movie, which was the Squamscott, I have other criticisms of it, but it orients to the street in an acceptable way.
I'll give you a great compare and contrast on what John's talking about, and that is very important, that it because it's in the downtown or close to the downtown, I would say it's in the downtown, it should address the street in a way that maybe something further out of town would not. A great example of this is the Exeter Mill. The old part of the mill that was redeveloped addresses the street beautifully. The new part that was just built in the last few years is way off the street with the parking in front, and you can see the difference in how the vibrancy that's created in terms of pedestrian traffic is just remarkable. So,
well, I didn't catch the first one that you liked. What was the name of it?
The whole mill complex has been developed in waves, or different phases of the project, and the original part of it was, because it was old historic buildings, it was right on the street. Okay. The parking was underneath, Then they built a new part of the mill complex across the street, and the site was set way back from the street with all the parking between the site and the street, and the feeling of being a place compared to what's across the street is, you just get the contrast so absolutely, and it was such a lost opportunity not to have the new part put on the street with the parking in back. John's point is so right on. It's like these things that are close to and in the downtown need to behave like they're in an urban environment, not in a suburban or exurban environment.
Mentioning aesthetics, I think we need to remember that just because we're talking affordable housing, that doesn't mean we have to go cheap on aesthetics.
What else? Anything you want to see there?
On the same thought, Lang Plummer here, serious consideration should be given, I'll use the word, towards manufactured homes. If you see how they built the bridge, Sarah Long Bridge, today or here, they put the deck in, which is going to go up and down. They brought it in at high tide, got it lined up, and as the tide goes down, it'll go in place. Very clever. But there's a whole piece. Buildings over here at the Academy. I realize this is larger construction, but they put pieces in there of 200 and 300 ton pieces, all assembled and drop it into place. That same technology is available in homes. People that manufacture, you've got the log homes, and all the other homes. I'm not sure about the pricing, but you can get as good a quality home driven in units or components on a truck, and 3 or 4 days to put together. So I believe that helps to make it more affordable. The designing is easy, it's there. So as compared to custom building, manufacturing is certainly a very viable option to look at.
So I want to be sure I heard it correctly, because my dirty secret is that my hearing is starting to go.
Okay.
And I'm refusing to acknowledge that. So sometimes I have to reorient every time I hear a new voice in here, in this very live, acoustically live
Terrible
building.
place to have a meeting.
Consider manufactured
Considered
housing.
manufactured
Got
housing.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not calling about the small side-by-side things, but you can have a home manufactured.
What else?
I think I have an interesting story to add to that. I'm going to change the name for it, call it modular housing. Okay? And a friend of mine who's big into green construction oversaw the construction of a multi-story, multi-unit modular project down in Cambridge that was breathtaking. Once all of the little modules were assembled in 3 different parking lots, and on Saturday morning they would say, all right, let's bring them in, and they would have the trucks line up, the crane would be there, and at the end of the day you had a building that was 7 stories tall.
Wow.
And then the next Saturday they built the next building next to it. So the whole thing was up in like 3 months with a lot of pre-work, and it was green construction, it was affordable construction, and it was rental, actually.
So back to what I would like to see in that corner.
Yes.
Is it's hard for me because I envision this house and I would never want it to change. So, it's kind of...
Change is hard.
I love change. It's just sometimes, we get stuck there.
Change is hard.
But what I would like to see is the idea of maybe mixed use, because one, it's close to the municipal parking, so you have that option there for parking. The other is I live in a mixed use, so I understand that while I'm not home during the day, the people who are shopping have a place to park, and when I come home at night, they're closed, and my parking is there. So there are plus sides to mixed use as far as I'm concerned, and parking is that. It's, if the business is closed when the resident gets home. So.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. What else?
I'll just double down on that mixed use. That's good stuff. I would like to see something that is not fake historic. Can I say that?
I live in Portsmouth. You can say it as much as you'd like. What else? What about design? Go ahead, Rachel.
So green was brought up a little while ago, so can we get some green technology in there? Can we work to look at the full cost of living, either ownership or rental, and take in utility costs as well and how we might mitigate that?
There's been a little talk around design, the design and what it might look like, no faux, historic, fake brick, like that. Any thoughts about that? Okay. Anything else? Any other, what you'd like to see? Okay. Okay, now we're going to get to the part that everybody really likes. Oh, that was kind of close, wasn't it? Sorry. Thanks, Robin. All right. I don't want to see. I don't want to see. Nancy, you started to say something, and I held you back, so it's gone. It happens to me, too. What else? I don't want to see. I mean, no faux brick is kind of that, right? No faux historic.
Well, I guess I don't want to see, I guess I'll call it a cookie cutter 5-story cement block building that, has no aesthetics at all. Doesn't pay attention to the streetscape. I mean, just, and you see that, not around Exeter, but you see it other places. I mean, something with, it's something that is all the things that we talked about we wanted to see. There's none of that.
What else? What else do you not want to see there?
I'll go back to price. I don't want to see more 300,000 and up development here per unit.
Okay, what else? What would go there and you'd think to yourself, I can't believe that's what they did there. I have a place like that around the corner from where we live that got redeveloped. And every day I go by it and I think, can't believe that's what they did.
Don't want to see cars parked in the front yard?
You do or do not want to see?
Don't, no.
No cars in the front?
No cars in the front yard. And I'm trying to figure out I don't want to see this. I guess the parking area, I'm going to say the parking area should be defined. So maybe I've said it already. I just don't want cars and junk. We need to be part of the community, and housekeeping needs to be done outside as much as inside.
Dan, did you have? Okay.
Another thing I would say, I would not want to see a structure that's not compatible with the neighborhood. I don't need a California home in the middle of a New England neighborhood.
So to probe that a little bit more, knowing the neighborhood and understanding the neighborhood beyond no California look, what other things do you feel would not be compatible with the neighborhood?
The architecture of the structures. If you're going to have basically a box, that's okay, but let's get a roof on there and maybe some other lines so it appears to be a home, not an office building. It doesn't appear to be like a building on Water Street that's business downtown and apartments upstairs. So it should look like a home. But if I could use an example, to me, the gym at the academy is horrible. The flying buttresses, they just do not fit this community. So no flying buttresses. Thank you.
I totally didn't hear. There's something about your voice I can't hear.
You
What?
didn't get the flying buttresses?
No flying buttresses?
No, have you seen the gym down here?
I don't know what that is, but I trust you.
Can I ask another question? I don't want to interject myself into the process,
please,
but it makes me ask questions. Another thing about that particular neighborhood, right where that site is that the scale of the surrounding structures is fairly petite. If you go 2 blocks over, the scale of the structures are bigger. So we're tasked with making sure that these homes can be affordable. And so, of course, that goes to the density.
Can I jump in here?
Well, we just finished.
Yeah.
And it goes to the scale. So we're going to be trying to get the right scale. So I'd like to hear you guys talk about that a little.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I want to talk about. I'm going to push back a little bit, Lang, respectfully. You use the word home, and I would push back on that. I don't think it needs to look like a home. Right next door to it is a commercial building. This idea that we cannot add any commercial buildings and expand our commercial district, I think is an unquestioned assumption that I'd like to push back on. I think our commercial district would benefit from having a little bit larger footprint and pushing a little bit along some of these streets while maintaining the integrity of the look. So I want to push back on the word you used, home, because I don't think it has to look like a home. It could look like a commercial building. The scale matters, but I think you're kind of in a transitional area there. So what do you have near that lot? You've got a restaurant in a building that's been rehabbed many times. The current owner is doing a brilliant job of maintaining the scale, but they've gone up a floor. And they've done it respectfully. There are some brick things on the next street back, closer to the river, sort of historic brick. It's not incredible looking, but it's very dense, and it has a little bit of height to it. So, it's like this idea that it has to look like a home. I'm going to push on that because I think you've got some municipal buildings right up the street. You've got some multi-unit. So it's really that area right there is very much in transition and also is a transitional area. So I don't think we should assume what should go there. I think we should leave some room for some creativity as long as it respects the scale that surrounds it. It could maybe even push on that a little bit, but obviously we don't want it to be completely lose the continuum with what surrounds it, but we should have an open mind so that we can get to affordability and density. Yep. And allow it maybe to transition, be a building that helps the surrounding area to transition a little bit, and we're not stuck in a certain paradigm. Okay.
Well, I think part of that, I think, can be accomplished through the exterior treatment, the finish, whether you use clapboards or probably you're going to use some type of siding. And there's all kinds in the same general price ranges. So you have different treatments, which in that neighborhood's fine. I mean, that's part of it is the variety. You can't have a brick end on it because that's too costly. But you certainly can do a lot of things with exterior finish. And a yard and tree and,
So you're really talking more about, am I hearing that you're talking about more about how the building is finished versus that it looks like a house?
The proper color is important. The proper color. You don't need a brilliant pink home. It's just not going to fit in, even though you have some bricks and other colors like that. But the choice of that, unless you get a Victorian, when you have to have gingerbread and all the other colors, that's something else. but we're talking about a basic home with a little color appropriate to the neighborhood. It's fine.
This is great. I've been waiting to have this conversation for 20 years. Thank you for drawing this out of me, Lang. If you look at the downtown, there's a mix of construction types. There's old 19th century red brick buildings. There's some 20th century faux historical red brick buildings. There's wood construction with clapboard siding, some gabled, some not. It's a real diversity, and it's part of the charm of the downtown. What would make this downtown pop, I contend, is if we were to add something to this downtown that reflected current construction standards and not try to fake it or doll it up. Let's actually add a modernist building whose scale is appropriate for the downtown into the downtown mix, and the contrast would make the downtown look so much better. And this might be an opportunity right here. So I'm going to push back. It's tough to see and it's counterintuitive, but I'm telling you, it would work. And you look at what the Academy has done with their campus, and not everything they've done is right, but more recently, they've used different ideas and they haven't gone with just a monolithic look, and it actually makes the campus look more unified. So it's something like I said, I've been waiting to say this in public for 20 years in Exeter, and I really appreciate you drawing this out of me, Lang. You do good work. All right, I'll be quiet now.
So anyways, scale is very important. If we build something out of scale, it doesn't fit and it doesn't look right, you know. It's the same thing, of these three things, which one doesn't belong? And downtown is transition. I'll go back to older pictures from the 19th century? No. Early 1900s. And along Water Street, they're all houses, where now there's a parking lot, garage, a Szechuan taste, a few other things. So, things are transition. What I'm concerned about, and Dan calls this a transition area, I think that's the word you use. What I'm afraid of is the transition area keeps getting pushed. This was the Franklin Street, South Street area was an older housing area, and it's going under some transition, and some of the scale of some of the buildings is getting a lot bigger. So you're starting to push out. Again, we got to remember, we're talking about housing. So let's not, we need to make sure that it fits in with housing. I know what Lang is talking about. Lang is want to make sure it's New England traditional, I guess. And I know what Dan is saying is that it doesn't have to just necessarily be New England traditional, but we can't put it out of scale. We can't make it so that it's one block, and the next block over says, well, they put that up there. Why can't I put that? So you're gonna change the neighborhood, and you're gonna push it away from what the housing. And this is what we're here to talk about. How do we create, or how do we continue to have? Because some of that area is probably areas that are, in the traditional sense, some affordable housing. We don't want to lose what we have at the expense of putting up new affordable housing. What have we gained if we do that? If we eliminate existing affordable housing at the expense of putting up new affordable housing, we haven't gained anything.
I wanted to just say that I would really be sad to see whatever happens, whether it's housing stock or business stuff, that it didn't take into account all the best and the brightest in terms of green design and sustainability and all of that. If we build something and we don't take those things into consideration, we ought to be shot.
So I just want to poke at this scale issue just one more time. The existing structure on the property right now is 2.5 stories. There's a building across there's a building across the street that's 2.5 stories is 2 stories with a high-pitched roof with space in that roof. So one could say 2.5 stories, or whatever the zone is, which Jen was 35? 35 feet, right. And so, one could also say, because there are larger structures elsewhere near, you might go higher than that, as long as it had whatever that larger, taller building was complementary to the neighborhood. Are we adverse to going higher than what is zoned? I gotta ask it because that's one of the things we'll push.
I'd be bothered by something greater than 3 stories on that particular location. And you can, within the 35 feet, you can get 3 stories in. So.
Very small people. Only toddlers.
So I think when we're talking about scale, another thing that we need to take into consideration is if we are going to go higher, what's the shape of the building? How is it complementing the horizontal spread? So if there's a good balance, then it may be totally appropriate based on the building. Mm-hmm.
So what's the right massing for that building?
One thing that we will be fighting with or fighting against is the affordability versus the density question. And that is something that there's going to be a tipping point as far as how we get there and what this thing's going to be and how many units I'm going to be able to get in order to make them affordable. Construction cost, if you're familiar with it, is going absolutely out of sight. Escalation cost right now every 6 months is in the 10% range, and it's not going down. And so, I'm looking at, something being built for, not less than $200 a square foot, which to get to a $300,000 or less sell price is going to be a trick and a half. And so we're going to be, as far as a design standpoint, a height standpoint, setback standpoint, and how we're going to get parking and all of this, we're going to go beyond pushing the envelope. We're going to blow it sky high in order to get there. So we're going to do it a couple different ways. We're going to say, all right, if we kind of stay within the parameters that you're talking about and they're not outrageous and we are listening, we're not going to get to the price point. All right, so what gets us to the price point and what does that look like? And that's kind of the exercise, or one of the exercises that we're actually going to do. So I wanted to put that out there as a statement because that's the problem that we're facing.
So I'm going to throw in, I want to talk about other things that we need to consider, like the things that Mike just raised, anything, other challenges that might exist in your mind in developing that site and having affordable housing on it. But first, I want to ask Mike a question, and that is, Michael, that is, in order to make the development of that site all affordable and only affordable, you have to bring in tax credits, right? And use some of the things that are out there that help develop affordable housing, presumably. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I mean, tax credits is one way of making it affordable. However, what's going to end up happening is tax credits is a limiting factor, because what's going to happen is only a limited certain income level is going to be allowed to live there. And also, a tax credit deal is tough on a for sale price versus rentals. A tax credit deal is going to work if they're rentals. Yet again, you're looking at percentage of area median income, so a limited income level is going to be allowed to live there, and something, you know, and anything above that, they won't qualify, even though, they need to get to a point where they want to downsize, they want to save money, and we're hearing that. I'm dealing with that in Bedford as well, where people that want to downsize, but there's no place in the town they want to live in where they can go. So what do? This might not necessarily be the site to do that, although we'll try to get there. But the point of finding a viable location in order to do that is probably something that can be worked on by the community and by local government in order to accommodate that, because it sounds like there's going to be more and more people that are going to fall in that category, and it's not just your community, it's all over the seacoast, it's all over the state.
So my follow-up, where I'm going with this would it be possible to build a certain number of units and have some of them at market rate, which would then allow some of them to be affordable? Is that a possibility? And if it is, what do people think about that? There are places where the development is built and a certain number of the units go at any gradation of market rate, while in order to have a certain amount of them stay affordable. So the whole thing, if you have 10 units, all 10 units aren't affordable, but maybe 6 of them are, or maybe only 3 of them are. And so I'm wondering what people think about that as a way, as kind of a compromise for that site.
Your comments raise a couple questions in my mind. One is, in terms of meeting that point, is the size of a lot going to help determine that? I mean, if you have a larger lot, you're going to cost more money, of course. But is it easier to achieve some of those goals with more land? Don't know. My other question is, I got to back up. Years ago, some people would put in the foundation, put a roof on it, and live in it. And in 5 years, they'd build a cape on it. Or you'd build a cape. I've got to use a cape because that's one of it. Or a simple ranch. Live in it a few years. When you have more money, then you're able to put on the second floor of the dormers or the breezeway or the whatever. So houses were built kind of in pieces as people were able to afford to do it. I don't know if that's possible today.
Let me try to answer, comment on 2 questions. One of the things, one of the costs of creating housing is site development. So how do we minimize site development costs for affordable housing is something we can maybe look at. 2 is that we have impact fees. We charge impact fees, school impact fees for residential, and if it's on the municipal water and sewer, we have water and sewer impact fees. Is that something we look at as a municipality, that if we're trying to build affordable housing, is that 2 of the fees that we waive? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying yes or no, but I'm just saying, again, that reduces cost, initial cost. In terms of mixed housing with some affordable, some subsidized, I guess, or They're not subsidized, but different rates. I thought we did that with Squamscott Commons behind here. I thought some of the apartments are market rate and some are at the other rate, income rates. I thought. Does anybody remember? Yeah. So we have that behind us, the Squamscott block, and I think that's worked out extremely well. I mean, I don't think anybody here is going to say that's not a success story. So, yeah, I think people will buy that. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Any other?
The only thing I think we have a problem with here is that we don't have a lot of developable land left. We have a lot of land, but I think it's 33% of our land is in conservation, which is a good thing. But we are very limited on what we can use to develop, say, a complex, so to speak. So that's a concern that I have. So I don't know how we can take what little we have and make more of it, out of it, I should say.
Great. So we're getting near the close of our time together. Are there any other things you want to point out?
Just to answer your question, yeah, it's always better to have half a loaf than no loaf.
I'm going to have to practice my bread drawing skills for that one. Anything else? Any other thoughts or wishes or concerns or feedback for the team? Great. Well, thanks. This was really fun, and good luck with affordable housing in Exeter. You see how well it's going in Portsmouth, so I hope you have a better experience than we're having. And good luck to the team, and thanks for letting me participate with you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Maria, so much. Before everyone goes, just again, I really want to thank Optima Bank and Trust. I want to thank Exeter Hospital. I want to thank Riverwoods, the Exeter Area Chamber of Commerce, Las Olas, me and Ollie, and the Green Bean. And right now, Maria, I want to really thank you so much for your work tonight. Everyone, thank you, well earned. Everyone, come back at 6 o'clock Friday night for the results of the architect team, and we'll see where the journey takes us. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it.